life that got you twisted. Things getting sideways. It's time to unfuck it. The Unfuck It podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Unfuck It podcast. I'm your co-host, Dwayne Lay, and I am very excited to be here to talk about some talent branding and AI stuff. Of course, with me, as always, is the lovely and talented Crystal Lay. How are you?
I'm good. I think you're like legally obligated to say these things, though.
Yes, but you don't like it when I tell people why. So, like being married,
Right.
that part, it's the other line.
I think it's just your phrasing I'm not fond of. But yeah, anyway, nice to be here. I'm excited to talk with Marvin. Hey, Marvin.
Hi, how are you today?
Doing great.
Good.
You want to introduce yourself to the folks who
Certainly.
undoubtedly are watching at home?
I'm Marvin Smith. I'm a leader of talent acquisition at the fourth largest credit union in the United States. I have a team of people that work in executive talent sourcing, regular talent sourcing, and then a person that focuses on recruitment branding and recruitment marketing. So kind of handle that whole talent attraction piece.
And we love all parts of that. That's fantastic.
Good. So do I.
So let's dive into the TA part first. So one of the things we had talked about in our pre-show is the difficulty in kind of setting yourself apart when everyone's using the same strategies, same tools, same platforms. How difficult is it to stand out as an employer, and how do you and your teams tackle that to try to set yourself apart from everyone else?
I think that being a nonprofit credit union versus a bank or fintech or those kind of things kind of puts you on a little different path. So a lot of the values of BECU is framed around people helping people and dealing with folks that may be in the margins. So there's this empathy, there's this value that people have. A lot of our execs have come into their roles with us after maybe making money in a different area, and now they want to give back. And so there's a lot of that. Every time I think of differentiation, I think of the Gartner research that they'd been following for a number of years, where they looked at the Standard and Poor's and 100 and looked at all the branding messages and the pillars of their EVP, and they say they're almost interchangeable if you weren't looking at them. It was really kind of interesting. They also added that most of the time we're all looking for the same roles. You know, you think back just a little bit before the pandemic, we were all in digital transformation. Now we're all in AI, and we're trying to bring those resources to bear and compete with the millions of dollars that the different social platforms are paying. And then I think finally we all use LinkedIn, or most people are using some variation of LinkedIn to find the same people. So we're seeing the same thing. We're approaching it the same way, and we're using the same sources. So somehow we have to be different in that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It does. You know, I hear that kind of conversation line a lot. And I think one of the things that we often have to do is step back from what's the exact, like, we have to step back a little bit and say, like, okay, if everyone's doing the same thing, whether that's on social or on their website or in email, it doesn't really matter. Differentiation does not come from saying more, particularly about culture content. It comes from being clearer, it comes from being more distinctive, and it comes from providing more credible organizational touch points and signals about who succeeds, how they succeed, and how the organization enables a person to live out who they are within the workplace. So that's actually a thing called signaling theory. And there's a lot of pieces to it, but if you take signaling theory and symbolic attraction and person environment fit, then you can take those things together and actually start to stand out because you start to do something different. Like typically what we see from an organizational perspective is, people will ask like, well, how do we make better social posts? Or, what are the pillars that we're saying that we're putting into the market that, nobody else really says, but everybody kind of says the same thing. And so, if we were to step back and say like, okay, instead of trying to be broadly and universally appealing, which we don't want because that's going to bring in people that are not going to be successful to our organization, what if we were to stop centering around great people, great culture, great growth opportunities that everyone says, and stop saying things like we invest in development or we invest in our people, which is table stakes. Like, of course you should do those things because you want your company to make money, right? So if you were to back and then say every people manager is trained on X, we provide Y to make sure that you are ready to be successful in your role within the first 60 days, 90 days, whatever that is. We do Z to make sure that you are able to not just be successful at work, but also at home, right? Like being specific is that differentiation signal on what do you in an organization, as an organization, do specifically to help your people. But companies tend to not want to do that because they're afraid, well, oh, if I do that, then company, B will just do the same thing and then it doesn't matter anymore. You know am I making sense?
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's one of the foundational pieces that we think about, whether you think about, Brian Adams and his give or get kind of philosophy or James Ellis and what is he thinking about now? Choosability, that's it. But it's kind of thinking about the things that make you unique. So one of our approaches is to think about a target talent audience. We're limited in terms by a lot of things that govern a credit union are very different than govern a bank or other financial institutions. So we don't operate and we don't recruit in all states. We only recruit in 10 states. So part of what we try to do is find the people in the states that we can recruit in the kinds of professions or skill sets that we want and appeal to them and talk about the values. So we're not trying to map, every value that most people are looking, if you take the top 10 of what people want, it's money, it's career development, those kinds of things. And so what we typically do is we try to market the values that we have that, we take the internal information and market those values, hoping to attract the people that share those values. So it's very specific, it's very targeted, and so it's a little different. So we're trying to use that. So does that make sense?
It does. Let's talk about that for a minute, because I think a lot of companies, and I'm not saying that yours does, I'm sure it probably doesn't, but a lot of organizations do confuse organizational values with individual values, right? And so they'll be like, as a company, we have these values. And usually it's something along the lines of, we believe in respect, and we believe in treat our customers well, and we believe in whatever, right? And they're all based off of an individual value. But what they don't do is focus in on like how that's lived out in the employment experience. It's very much focused on how do we live these values out to improve the customer experience, which is important, but not keyed correctly for talent attraction, right? So it's good to say, hey, these are the things that we care about and we service in our customers, but all of that keys into one value from a talent attraction and retention experience, right? Like from that perspective, in-person environment fit, it keys into that customer orientation, which is one of 16 values, but then you're not really caring for the rest of them because all you really did was explain all of the different values that go into customer orientation. So from your perspective, what's the best way that you've found to show how those other values fit from the employer, like, and are adapted to the employment experience?
the Cliff Notes version is we take the values that the internal folks tell us that they value here. And one of the top goals is compliance. So we throw that out because nobody really cares about compliance. I mean, they do, but that's not a top
Not
value.
willingly. Yeah, not willingly. Yeah.
So if you take the top values, which really evolve around the leadership of the credit union and the things that we say are important, and then we map them literally to what we combined in a lot of different surveys and combine them to the stack ranking that exists, and we obviously take advantage of AI a little bit and look at the sentiment of what a target audience wants. So a software audience or a banking audience, corporate banking will want something different. But we literally try to map to what they want, the WIFM, right? What's in it for me type of thing. So we lead with that, and we do it in a couple of ways. We do it on campaigns. A lot of the sourcing is done the traditional kind of email, 4 or 5 emails over a few days. And at the same time, we're working on longer term relationships with talent pipelines, nurture campaigns, because no one in Texas has ever heard of BECU, and no one in Georgia or Arizona or California probably hasn't heard of us. We're a kind of a name brand around Seattle, like the Starbucks and the old line Nordstroms and all the brands here. But outside of the area, they don't even call us BECU; they call us BQ. So it's a very interesting thing that we approach.
Does anybody ever ask you, like, what's a coup, and why would I want to be one? That'd be what a great foundation for a campaign, though, right?
I don't
what is
disagree.
coup? Like,
I'll run that one up and duck.
Yeah, building up brand recognition is definitely a tall order, whether you're doing it for, customer and organizational purposes or employer brand. But what we found, like not just research, but experientially, is that candidates infer a lot of employer personality and what it's going to be like to work there from communication style, not just messaging topics. And so one of I think the most useful findings in recent research is that particularly social media communication, but email communication as well, characteristics themselves matter. So there's a journal, Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Processes, actually put something out about that recently that found that applicants infer employer brand personality and then attribute that to what their work experience is going to be like from the company's social media pages, from their emails, and those inferences affect, like the communication on those, and the inferences affect the overall organizational attractiveness and how willing they are to refer. So basically what that means is the differentiator isn't really just what you post, but how you sound. So it's not that, it's that old saying, like, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. It really is. Mm-hmm. So if every competitor sounds PR sanitized, or every company that sounds specific and informed, but very, clean, corporate-esque, formal, may actually send the message that, hey, we're really structured. There's not a lot of flexibility here. You're not going to have a lot of autonomy, without even realize that those are the signals that they're sending, right? And so there's a lot of research that's being put out right now around how people infer written communication and what that means in the context of employment experience. I shouldn't say a lot, but there's some significant research. And how, speaking in a more personable, informed manner, like writing in that personable, casual, informed way can send these signals that we're a warm place to work, they have high credibility around their messaging, and they tend to be more attractive to people, so they tend to trust the messages that they're getting more. And I thought that was really kind of interesting, right? So again, it's not just being able to be unique, which I think a lot of people think about. There's very little that's unique, right? Like, it's, was it Shakespeare? It probably wasn't even Shakespeare, but there's somebody who said, like, hey, there's 10 10 basic plots, right? There's 10
Yeah.
basic stories that we all tell over and over again. And I think that's certainly applicable to talent attraction. Like the employment experience isn't massively different from organization to organization unless your organization is very poorly aligned around its talent or exceptionally well aligned around its talent. And then you've got these like polar extremes that can create some really different employment experiences. But for the most part, people just go to work, right? And we mostly all get benefits. We mostly all have like schedules that we kind of understand, and we kind of know what we're doing when we get there. And there's going to be some collaboration issues, and there's going to be some things that are really great. And some people are going to work in silos, and some people are, like it doesn't change that much from organization to organization for a lot of folks. And so this like 1-2 punch of be specific on what it's like to work in your organization, both from a values perspective and specifically what you do to help set them up to succeed, paired with be a little more casual, be highly informed, be very warm in your messaging, might be that differentiator that companies need right now, particularly in an AI world full of like triplet sentences and quiet whatevers. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. We're using video a little bit to augment it. So on the nurture campaigns, we feature different leaders and different people that are related to that profession and talk about it. At BECU, a lot of it's about what is our why? Why are we here? Why do we stay? That sort of thing. And so there's a lot of messages that are not polished. They're very low budget kind of approach to things. And we're trying for that truth, that authenticity that we get there. We've got a long ways to go, but I like what you're suggesting, and I need to do a little bit deeper dive into that. So good stuff.
I would challenge you a little bit to move from authenticity to evidence. So a lot of talent brand content, and I'm going to say content because I don't think it matters what medium it sits on, over relies on the idea of authenticity while kind of saying a lot of the same stuff. So if we move from because they'll have their employees say it and like, oh, okay, because employees are saying it, which is good, right? Like that is a good thing. It's authentic. Well, okay, but we need more than authenticity. We need, when it sounds like you're doing this, but I would just kind of shift the perspective from focusing on authenticity to focusing on workplace evidence. Right. Because there's this over reliance on things like celebration posts and office, imagery and awareness days and polished employee testimonials. And I love that yours is not. That's great. It's not that it's useless. It's just like it's easily copied. A lot of companies do that, but that's not what candidates really hone in on. The evidence-rich posts, the evidence-rich content that candidates really dig into, are how manager behaviors and leadership norms are handled within the organization. What does performance feedback look like? What does onboarding actually look like? How does internal mobility happen? How is flexibility operationalized? How is inclusion practiced in meetings, promotions, accommodations? How are teams solving real problems at work? And what have people learned and built, improved, and changed? Like those are a lot of the whys I think that you're probably talking about. And that's all workplace evidence. And all of that is much harder for competitors to just one-on-one replicate because it reflects your, we like to talk about talent brand in terms of systems, right? It reflects your employer brand engine, your talent attraction system, not just the aesthetics that people can kind of gloss over on the top.
So a lot of great stuff here. I want to, if we can pivot just for a minute, I want to go back. One of the things you mentioned is your use of AI and how you've rolled that in, and it made me think. Banking is an incredibly regulated sector, and I have to imagine like getting into the AI pool, so to speak, is challenging at times, in the best of times. for companies. How difficult was it to really start leveraging AI for some of this stuff in an enterprise setting, let alone one as regulated as banking?
We're taking baby steps. How about that? So I think part of what we try to do, well, first at a corporate level, we purchased an AI firm. So there is a whole initiative going on in terms of how we can integrate AI into the workflows in a regulated environment. So that has been going on for the last 6 or 7 months. And so we're starting to see a little bit coming out of it. There's also a movement. We use Copilot because we have the Microsoft suite. And so they've created champions in that, and now they're going through their second wave of people being trained in AI. So there is a push to integrate it into our work, but very carefully, not the kind of, with all the controls and so forth, and with cyber and with the security people involved. It takes a while to get things through. So it's, you have to be pretty careful. But we do have some tools some HR tech kinds of tools that have been approved, and we use them. And I think most of the AI we're doing is really, we deconstruct, the workflows a little bit. And so if you think about, even after we have AI, there's certain fundamental things that are going to exist in recruiting. The numbers and the metrics are still going to matter. A hard job to fill is still going to be a hard job to fill. The talent brand is part of the experience that the employees and the candidates have. I mean, a lot of those things are still there. They were still there at the turn of the century when we got the internet and went wide with it, and it's going to be the same in this. So those of us that had experienced that in the past kind of, take maybe a slower approach. So where can we interject it? Talent intelligence is really good. We can dive deeper on sentiment, and we've done a lot with just bringing that information to kickoff meetings and changing how recruiting has moved from being, kind of a service to being partners with them. We're attending all the operational meetings. Now, this is something that's been evolving over about the last 3 years or 4 years. There was a change of a CEO, and our CEO is committed to growth. We want to make sure that the credit union movement still exists, that there's value there, and it's not just a former Boeing employees credit union, but we're going to have a larger footprint. We're merging in later this year with a company, a credit union in the Sacramento area. So there's growth, and I have to tell you, when I came there were a lot of people in place that were people that had been there for years and years and years. And they didn't necessarily end up in the position they were in having a skill set that we would think of that they need. So there's been quite a bit of turnover, quite a bit of change. Different people from different backgrounds are coming in. So it's very much a dynamic culture and change. So that's part of, you read Glassdoor reviews on us, you'll find that different people that were impacted with that change, that didn't have the skill sets that we needed to move forward, are a little angry. So we have stuff to overcome, and so it is kind of an adventure. But we're trying to use AI where it makes sense, which is your original question, and we do it with messaging. But we're still tempering it somewhat. We're not believing everything that's generated by AI. So my team is really an experienced team, in terms of talent sourcing, and they're still putting things in their own words, and they're getting, really good results with that. The talent acquisition partners are all, we have very little turnover. They've come in within the last 2 or 3 years and really made a statement and changed how we do things. And now we're in the next iteration of growth that happens. And so it's the evidence-based things you're talking about, as we think about what's going on with, it started out SEO, and then we went to GEO, now we went to LLM or
AU, yeah.
or whatever,
EIEIO, all the things.
Yeah, so we're doing something with that, but like Crystal was saying, it's going to be the evidence-based things that are going to make the difference, because AI is going to reach out and consolidate all that information quickly, and if somebody writes, is BECU a great place to work, they're going to pull that together, and the candidate prospect is going to say, interesting. So,
yeah, there's so many interesting applications out there, and there are so many, I'll say, marginal applications of AI that seem to be what people latch onto. I think it's fascinating that you acquired an AI firm, like to do the work. Like it's a good way to sidestep some of the security issues, so you're not turning things over to a third party, like you've got them all internally.
But it also makes sense, right? I mean, financial services is one of the industries that have been shown to be moving the fastest on AI skills. So if you look at PwC's 2025 AI jobs barometer, showed that finance was one of the early adopters in AI, particularly financial services in general, particularly in hiring for those capabilities. So, we know from a organizational growth standpoint that you can either grow it internally or you can acquire it. And it sounds like acquiring it is certainly faster, right? Because they've already set up the infrastructure and things around that. So that makes a ton of sense to me that you would acquire that talent and that system already put together. From how do you put it? I mean, the other thing to think about is like Deloitte talked about, like, even though financial services is moving faster in adopting AI from a work standpoint and in the consumer side, on the people side, only 18% of financial services executives said their organizations are implementing generative AI in the talent function. And so most of that usage is in marketing, sales, and customer service. So, I mean, really that tells us a couple of things. Like, one, there is, like, the sector sees value in AI, but talent and employer brand applications are still developing and understandably more cautious. I mean, if you want to look at, like, what is the biggest class action lawsuit that's forming in the world right now, it's in,
Workday Mosley. Yep.
Yeah, Workday v. Mosley. So, Mobley, sorry. So the caution makes sense. But I think, like, when we look at, like, how to use it, it's really, I think you hit on it, Marvin, it's trust, right? Like, candidates have a really fragile perception of fairness because hiring has never been fair, right? Like, the employment process has never been an equal and equitable system. It has always been weighted towards the employer. Even in a candidate-driven market, it is still ultimately the employer that gets to extend a job offer, that gets to set to a large degree, it gets to set the wage and the working conditions and all of those things, right? So fairness has always been pretty fragile. So when we interject AI into that, where there's already some question, what we've seen across the research, and there's a lot of it, it's almost 2,000 different Scopus indexed articles, has shown us that fairness and transparency are the central themes in AI hiring and what we need to focus on and what we need to do. And to me, that screams every organization, financial or otherwise, needs to be looking at adopting a AI Bill of Rights, like a candidate Bill of Rights. Like, this is how we use it. This is what we do with it. This is how it impacts your hiring decisions or not. And here's how you can say, like, I don't think this is fair, right? Like, here's how you can challenge it, especially if AI is making hiring decisions for you, which it sounds like in your case it's not. But if it is, Like, there needs to be a way that candidates can challenge that and say, I think you got it wrong, because it's gonna get it wrong. Anybody who has ever done a search on ChatGPT, like, come on, its number one source is Wikipedia, its number two source is Reddit. It's gonna get stuff wrong. So I'm not saying you're making hiring decisions based off of LLMs, but the point is machines are not infallible. And so we know that it tends to reinforce whatever organizational and systemic bias exists in your own hiring data, which everyone has. So there has to be a way that that can be challenged in order to maintain and protect that fragile perception of fairness. I will get off my high horse now. So, or soapbox, whatever it is.
We're not there to use AI in the review of candidates. If you ask me what I did yesterday, I have an opening for a talent sourcer, and it was we did a combination of just some ads and posting on LinkedIn, and so I was going through the 500 plus candidates that had applied for that. So I was doing it the old-fashioned way of reading resumes and so forth. So, and I was really looking for a way to do it faster, to be honest with you. But sometimes we do it that way. We have, certainly the things that we're a little cautious about, using a product that's going to stack rank people.
Yeah.
Even though machine learning and doing that has been around a long time, we still are a little cautious on that. So we sort of do we use that approach, and then we come back and we manually double check that we haven't missed anybody, or do some keywords thing just to make sure, because it is a matter of trust, and it's really important to us. We're member owned, and so we don't want to impact the reputation that we have, and it's challenging enough in these kind of times where everything is amplified if a mistake is made, and that happens sometimes. So
now, when you talk about doing it the old-fashioned way when you're going through 500 applicants, do you use the old trick of throwing half of them just in the trash because you don't want people who are unlucky? Is that part of that process at all?
I could have used that advice yesterday. So thanks.
Speaking of those kinds of things, when we get to this part of the show, we generally come to my favorite segment, which is where we ask you to give us some of the learnings you have from your career, from your place in the workplace, and some things you're doing. And as regular watchers know, this is my favorite, the Go and Fuck Yourself segment. So Marvin, you and I talked about this a little bit. Tell us a story. Tell us, what have you done to improve the way you operate, improve the way that you bring candidates in, or just adjusting your own approach to a problem?
I think back, my background, about half of my career was spent in the third party world as in the agency side of things, and then I made a move to chase the pre-IPO money that's so prevalent in startups around the Seattle area. So and I went to kind of the dark side of recruiting, or the bright side of recruiting, depending on how you're looking at it. But I think that it was probably, around 2001, 2002, I was reading an article by Kevin Wheeler, and he talked about talent communities. And he was posing the idea that we could have a talent community. And I became kind of curious about that. And so I was at Microsoft at the time, and so I started to experiment. I was in a talent sourcing role supporting about 30 recruiters, and my goal was to look at the future talent that this particular area of Microsoft was going to need. So I didn't have to worry about putting butts in seats. I had to worry about strategy. So it's a different way of looking at things. So I started experimenting with how we can build relationship and community leveraging technology, but still keeping a human touch in it. And that led me to Jobs to Web and some other kinds of implementations that I've done over the years. But when I went to Lockheed Martin a few years later, my boss at the time said, I want you to build talent communities. I want not a database that you know, spam them, but where people talk to each other and so forth. And so the first one we did was for military, exiting military, which really makes sense at Microsoft. I mean, at Lockheed. And that's where we began, and we ended up with about 20,000 people. But what we really believed would happen is these people would stay around once they transitioned, and they would turn around and help their buddies that were exiting later. Didn't happen that way. So we did a couple others, one in cyber, which was a total disaster. The last thing you want with cybersecurity people is to talk to each other, share any kind of information. So that was a brainstorm by one of our bosses, who shall remain nameless. And then we were able to do it with early career people, and that worked pretty well. But it doesn't scale. It takes too many people to have that conversation. And that's probably the biggest aha that I had was, you know, in order to build relationship and trust, you have to constantly feed that with content. And the best content is by the people. So in the military recruiters who had served previously and could talk about their transition were the highest reviewed and the best read kind of things. But you couldn't convince leaders to come into those organizations and make it part of it. So I had to give up that big dream. And so I landed on pipelining and building relationships that are more casual and not quite the same as what a talent community would be. Nurturing, giving them information on what's in it for them. Can you imagine working here given, you know, the video or given the evidence of who we are and what we stand for and those kind of things. So I think that's the biggest learning I had is it doesn't scale. Talent communities don't scale. So I cringe every time somebody says, well, our talent community we're building it. And I go, not really, you're building a database. But anyway.
Yeah, I think most people build talent networks and they call them communities.
Yeah.
Talent networks can scale. Most don't. I mean, communities take years to build. Not months, not weeks, years. And so where they tend to work best is when you have a very large, well-known brand, where you have a very high volume, engaged discipline like AI and again, you'd have to have a pretty large company to have that in high volume, or developers that you could build a community within an existing community around, right? So you can build a GitHub community and they can talk to each other, right? Like GitHub's already a thing, right? Or you could build a Reddit sub that Reddit's already a thing, right? So you can build a community within a community. That tends to have higher degrees of success than asking someone to join your community that exists on a separate platform that they have to log into and all of those things. There are reasons to do it. I'm not saying never do it, but understand if you do that, you're not looking at a few weeks or even a few months. You're looking at a multi-year project to really get it up and running and probably a couple iterations of it. So
yeah. So scaling is really important, you know, in an enterprise, you know, that whatever you do needs to be flexible and scale, and it just doesn't move that fast, you know. And anyway, it's been a hard lesson to take, but anyway, we're resilient if nothing else in this business, right?
Absolutely. So, last question, and this is just me personally. I just wanted to know for someone who's joining your organization, let's say as a teller or someone on the inside of one of the branches, how long does someone have to actually work there before they're allowed to go swim in the money like Scrooge McDuck? Is that a orientation thing? Is it a 5-year anniversary? Like, what's the scale of that?
Yeah, it's kind of a pipe dream, isn't it?
Okay. It's good to have goals, right? We have to have things to look forward to. So, Marvin, always a pleasure to talk to you. So for the folks who don't know you, where can they find you?
LinkedIn. It's easy to find.
Okay. That's easy. I love that.
So is it just linkedin.com/in/Marvin Smith?
Marv Smith.
Marv Smith. There
Somebody else was there first. I was in the first.
Any idea who it
quarter.
was? Probably a guy named Marvin Smith. I said, any idea who it was?
Yeah,
probably...
I think so. I think he might be a singer. I'm not sure, but I'm on Facebook, but I use that to primarily post wildlife pictures and those kind of things. So
right on. Now, do you put those on Instagram as well? If anybody wants to go see them?
I do.
Okay.
Marv Smith on Instagram too.
Right on. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Oh, Crystal, do you have final words?
Just thank you for joining us. That was what I was going to say. So you're on it. So
we're so in sync. It's amazing.
Now, that being said, if you could listen to anyone talk about how they unfucked themselves or something that they unfucked, my dad would be so proud. Who would you like to hear from?
One of my favorite people is Jerry Crispin. And, I think that, first of all, he's a little older than me and a lot wiser than I am. So we kind of have a competition going on that. But I think in terms of just being able to, be in this industry for 50 years and adjust to it and he kind of gets a good pulse reading on what other organizations are doing and what separates them. So I listen to him quite a bit when I have a chance. So,
well, we will tell him that you personally requested he come on the show, so we can talk about all those things. Sounds great. Maybe we'll do it over a cooking class. He still gets involved in some of those, so that might be a good time. We'll make lasagna and we'll talk. Yeah,
send him a nice bottle of wine and he'll do it.
Absolutely, 100%. Marvin, thank you for joining us. This has been a lot of fun. I know we have other stuff we didn't get to talk about, and so maybe we'll get together over a beer or a glass of wine at some point. Maybe we'll come up to Seattle. We'll have a cup of coffee with you. We'll talk more about AI and process design, which, stuff I can't get enough of. So thank you so much for being here. Crystal, thank you for being here. And Dwayne, thank you for being here. Yes, you're very welcome. I'm glad to have joined you. So we're going to wrap up, and we will see you on the next episode. Cheers.
It's time to fuck it. Thanks for tuning in, friends. Until next time, keep it real and unfuck it.